Hello and welcome back to the Battle Room. My name is Colin. Today I wanted to talk about the top 16 teams from the Milan special event held in Italy. It was the last event of the European season, so this was for all the marbles. This was for people who needed their invite, people who wanted that final win. And so yeah, it was a pretty big event. Around 300 players, so it was bigger than a lot of the North American regionals, which are being capped off. So this was a really good event to look at because Europe is a really, really strong region, but also it was a big tournament. So the players who are doing well and who are performing at this tournament are going to be players to watch out for, and also teams to watch out for. So we'll start at the bottom here, top 16. Number 16 is Marco Fierro. Marco Fierro, if you guys don't know, international champion, insane gamer, but showed up with a pretty standard team. This is a team that got first at the New Jersey regionals. I think it's very much a team that gives you a lot of tools to play with. It uses really strong Pokemon such as Zacian, such as Dynamax Thundurus, which is really, really good right now. And so yeah, it's just a really, really good team. Lots of tools for a really, really good player. So it's no surprise to see Marco do well and top cut with this team. But ended in top 16, which is pretty important to note. Next up, we've got a pretty standard Zacian Ogre team, basically the OE team. This team is a team I like a lot. It gives you lots of tools. You have double fake out, you have tailwind, and you have 2 insane restricted, so it makes a lot of sense. Next up is the Gilgamesh team, which is Calyrex Ice plus Reshiram. It's just a really solid core. Like, Reshiram is really good at beating Zacian, and that's something that Palkia doesn't do as well as Reshiram outside of Max. So yeah, it's just built around that. You have Shadow Sneak Mimi, Gastrodon, and Sin, just great supports for a strong team. Next up is another very similar team to Marco's, but instead of the Rillaboom, it's a Whimsicott, so it opted for more speed control. Gives you a little bit more of an oppressive mode, like a little bit more of a go button, while weakening, I assume, your Kyogre matchup and your Gastrodon matchup. But Whimsicott is still, you press the Tailwind button and you just smack things with Calyrex. It's still a good team, still a great, a really strong piece that can be added to this team. And then we have this team again, the same team as Marco, again finishing in top 16. I've talked about it already. Strong team. Next up is... Okay, so this is a team that I think is gaining a lot of traction right now. At the last European tournament, it did place 3 out of 4 of top 4. There was only one team in top 4 that wasn't the same 6 as this. So this team is gaining a lot of traction. Some players are calling it like Rain or Pengi 6, because Pengi won the North American Indianapolis regional with it. But then there's a player named Crystal who was also using this team. So I personally like Rain because I feel like it embodies a lot of the same tools outside of the G-Max Wildfire edition. But, it's got, Grimmsnarl, Incineroar, the Groudon or Kyogre, the Weather Setter, Zacian, and then this would normally be Charizard, and then this would be Gastrodon. So it's a little bit different, but I feel like they play sort of similar, and they have a lot of really strong tools and pieces that give the player a lot to play. I think one of the big weaknesses is Regieleki. Rillaboom is the only resist and one of the main Pokemon to deal with it. I also think Thundurus, a well-played Thundurus, can give this team issues, but at the same time, like, Thundurus can crumble to Zacian, Aleki can crumble to Rillaboom, and, like a Solvest Ogre could pop off versus Aleki. So there are still tools that do combat the weakness Pokemon, but I think this team is like really, really insane, and one that is basically just gives you all the tools you can use. I know Pengi as a player was very confident in the team, and it was just a team he was super comfortable in, and he ended up winning a regional with it just because it gave him so many tools and so many pieces to perform at a high level. So yeah, I think this team gives you a lot of cool things, and I think it is a really strong team in the current format outside of those few weaknesses I mentioned. So next up is another Zacian Ogre team, but with Landorus, Whimsicott, Aleki, and Amoonguss. This seems to be a little bit more aggressive, a little bit more offensive, which is cool to see. I think Zacian Ogre can really just be so flexible and move in so many different ways that you can make it a little bit more hyper offensive, or you can really bulk it down with the defense, right? Like, this one's super defensive, this one's super offensive with Whimsicott, Aleki, and I think that's what makes it so cool, and such a good restricted duo that I think we'll see a lot of in the, for the rest of the season. Next up is this team again, but with Whimsicott. So this team is really tearing it up right now, and I'll just scroll up one more. This one just doesn't have Incineroar, which is crazy too. So this one's like more hyper offense, right? Like when Indeedee, Calyrex just goes super hard, really aggressive, spam expanding force. And yeah, so I think like these teams are something to prepare for and something to watch out for, because I do think Zacian and Calyrex is a really strong duo, and we're finally seeing it like really solidify itself. Because I think for a while it wasn't very popular, it wasn't really used, but now it's really tearing up these tournaments. It's doing really well. We saw a ton of them in top 16. This one's actually in top 8. Luca here is in top 8. So yeah, it's really tearing up the format, doing incredible stuff at these tournaments. All right, next up is Gulio. Gulio's team is something that he's been using for a while now. Lunaludon is something he's really comfortable with, and I've seen him spamming it on ladder. I've had the honor to lose and get smack daddied by this team, but I think Gulio is a really fantastic player, and just cutting event after event is no surprise. And recently they did finish second, I believe, at the last tournament in Europe. So just truly popping off with the same 6 Pokemon. Lunaludon is something that is really interesting. I actually have I'm more comfortable with Lunaludon. It's something I've used quite a bit. I used it at a regional, and Lunaludon to me is just like a lot of good tools, and you just kind of play Pokemon. It's very reactionary. Lunaludon has Meteor Beam to help cover for Incineroar and Thundurus and stuff of that nature, and then you have the really strong Fire mode of, Sun mode of Groudon plus like either Venusaur or Charizard. This team happens to have both. A lot of them are just Venusaur, like the team we see above it. But yeah, it just gives you a lot of options with Groudon, and then Incineroar just brings everything together typing wise. This one has a Trick Room mode with Porygon, like a really consistent Trick Room mode. Some teams opt for Feeny, some teams have Thundurus Feeny instead of Charizard P2. But overall, it's just giving you tons of tools to find success with and put pressure on the opponent's team. But it's very reactionary. It's much more like, all right, so they're going to do this, so I'm going to reply. Like when you lead Kyogre Torn, you're going to press Water Spout. But this team is more like, all right, I'm going to react to said Water Spout. Next up is Baked's team. Again, this is a pretty similar version. Umbreon is really cute. I think Umbreon's kind of a cool mon. It's very good versus Ice Rider. And I assume, if we look at this team, it's pretty weak to Ice, honestly. So Umbreon being on this team is not very surprising. And it looks like a good addition to help deal with Ice Rider. That's the main thing I'm seeing there. Next up is another Zacian Ogre team, but this time it has Shedinja. So this is a French team. Obviously, it's an Italian player, but a French team that originated, I believe, with Hari and Red Silver, and it's just a really strong team built around finding success with Shedinja. I think it's a pretty strong team. Shedinja is very annoying, and if you're not diligent, and even if you are diligent and you're playing really well, Shedinja can still sometimes find ways to checkmate you. It's always a pressure in team preview, because if they bring it, you got to be able to KO it. And obviously, a Pokemon like Incineroar is on most teams, as we see, but that doesn't mean that it is unbeatable for the Incineroar. For the Shedinja team, we obviously have great tools like Kyogre, Kartana, and Zacian. All hit Incineroar with super effective damage, put pressure on it. So I do think, even though Incineroar is so prevalent, this team and Shedinja can still pop off, even though at first you might be like, whoa, how are they going to deal with Incineroar? But obviously, tons of tools to help deal with Incineroar. And it feels really rough, too, because when you see Shedinja, sometimes Incineroar is your only Pokemon to deal with it. So you're forced to bring Shedinja into this rain team, which feels like garbage. And I think that's one of the strengths of Shedinja, is that it forces your opponent to play a certain way, and a good player can capitalize. Next up, we have Banfox's team with the Slowbro. So Slowbro, Yveldon is really weird, first of all. Like, to perform this well, Yveldon is, I think, a strong pairing, but it seemed to fall short recently, until Banfox here pops off with the Slowbro team. I think one of Yveldon's biggest weaknesses lately has been the Ice Rider stuff. Ice Rider has become more and more popular, which we actually didn't see any Gothitelle Ice Rider or Palkia Ice Rider even in this cut so far. But I do think that Ice Rider is pretty relevant, pretty strong pair. And Yveltal really hates Ice Rider. I think Ice Rider is really strong, and Yveltal Trick Room goes up, Ice Rider sucks, right? But Banfox here, as the intelligent decision to bring Slowbro. Slowbro does get Iron Defense. It does get access to Body Press. And so what Slowbro is basically doing is patching up an Ice Rider weakness, while also potentially patching up other weaknesses as well. I'm sure you can bring it versus something like Rinyasun. I'm sure you could bring it versus like certain ogre teams as well. Whatever you kind of need it for, if you want to press Trick Room, it's pretty good at doing that. The only matchup you probably can't bring it into is Ghost Rider, but hey, who needs to worry about Ghost Rider when you got a freaking Yveltal and Incineroar? So Slowbro just looks like a really intelligent decision here. It's just a Trick Room setter, probably with Iron Defense Body Press to help beat Ice Rider. It's really cool. I like the addition of Slowbro here because I think like the team is pretty standard overall, and then Slowbro is just to patch up that one weakness and just make the team like glue it all together. I think Slowbro is truly the glue mon here, and it's really cool to see a mon like Slowbro pop off because I think in this format like a lot of the teams are very standard, very similar, but sometimes all it takes is one creative choice here from Bandfox to slap Slowbro on, and it ends up propelling them to a top 4 finish at a huge European regional. So congrats to Bandfox for piloting Slowbro so well, but also just like the creative decision making of one mon can make a huge difference. Because obviously in these other teams we might see spreads that are giving them advantages, but we can't necessarily see that. But with Slowbro, we definitely can see how it's propelling them to victory. It's a really cool addition to the team, and it's just fun to see like a mon like Slowbro find success. So next up is Alex here. These are both top 4, and this one is another pretty standard Zaysh Ogre team, but usually this would be Lando on the OE team, but this one is going to be an Alecki. Just giving more speed control in Tailwind while also putting another great max on the field, instead of Lando. I think the weakness would probably, like, Lando is really good versus, like, Sun stuff, but, like, Alecki can also be pretty solid versus Sun if you're piloting Ogre well. So, Alex is opting for a little bit slightly different change from Lando, but I think it's a pretty cool team. I think Ogreization, again, I've mentioned this before, is just so flexible, and like if you're a more defensive player, you can cater it with like a Grimmsnarl plus Zapdos kind of core. But if you're more offensive or you want to play a little bit more aggressive, you can obviously slap on Torn and Alecki, and it completely changes the dynamic of these two Pokemon. And I think that's the really fun part, and I think a lot of players should explore Zaysh Ogre. I'm a huge Zaysh Ogre fan. I'm biased. I'm biased as hell here, and I think everyone should try Zaysh Ogre because it is so fun, and it just creates so much pressure. Just having those two Pokemon, I think their synergy is incredible. We saw literally on day 1, like day 0, like people, I think it was like 2 years ago, people were playing around with this format when it wasn't even announced. It wouldn't be announced for another year. And I remember Unreality was practicing with Zaysh Ogre like in this like fun Japanese tournament, and he was like, yeah, Zaysh Ogre's crazy, right? And it's like it just makes so much sense. It's a steel type, we got a water type, it protects the steel type with Drizzle, and then it just allows you to run so many good Pokemon like Tornadus. Incineroar actually does synergize incredibly well with Rain, because usually you're weak to stuff like Ferrothorn, you're weak to steel types because you're setting up Rain for them. But fire types have always been great. It gives you Intimidate. Rillaboom's awesome. It helps with enemy Ogre. It gives you another fake out support for Zacian and for Kyogre as well. It's just so many good tools all in one team. I just stand Zaysh Ogre. So it's cool. I could talk about it for hours, but yeah. So congrats to Alex. And then next up is Asuya here with the legendary, the one and only Rinya's Sun. So Rinya's Sun, for those who do not know, I made a YouTube video about it, but Rinya's Sun is basically a 6-mon team that has been doing really, really well. It popped off at a lot of tournaments. It's still doing well to this day. Obviously with Asuya here, who just finished second with it in a 300-person tournament. Rinya's Sun has kind of fallen off in my opinion. We really haven't seen it too much lately, but here we go again. Asuya popping off with Rinya's Sun, placing second here with the 6-mon team. Just bread and butter Rinya's Sun. Obviously there was some changes. The Grimmsnarl, I believe, didn't run Reflect. It ran Trick, Thunderwave, Light Screen, which is pretty cool. It's a little bit of a different take. I think it does make a lot of sense as well. Double speed control with Trick Iron Ball, and then Thunderwave, and then Light Screen for the bad matchup of special moves, but you don't really need Reflect as much because you do have Intimidate. Groudon's got a beefy defense stat, so it makes sense. There's not too much to say about Rinya's Sun. It's really cool to see it pop off and get second at this tournament because I feel like Asuya was just a fantastic pilot. I do think Rinya's Sun is a little bit weaker, but maybe it's that resurgence time, right? Like Rinya's Sun was doing meh, is doing okay, but now it's time for the resurgence, and Asuya is leading that with that charge with Rinya's Sun here popping off, getting second, which is really strong. I personally wouldn't have predicted this, but I feel like it was really just like a really comfortable team. They played extremely well, and I feel like it just still gives you the tools. And if you know how to approach the matchups, like you're able to practice versus rough matchups, like potentially this one, you might be able to figure out ways to get through them that we haven't really seen when you commit yourself to a team like Rinya's Sun. So I really do feel like it was just thoroughly planning the matchups, and then also just playing extremely well. So congrats to Asuyo with Rania Sun getting second, but Rania Sun didn't win, but Moltres did. Galar Moltres is a really interesting mon. I definitely wouldn't have ever put any money on this Pokemon winning the regional, but it did, and with Shedinja and P2. So once again, talking about Zacian Ogre. But this one's a very, very different take. It seems very defensive with Incineroar, P2, and even Moltres. Moltres is a very bulky Pokemon. And then Shedinja as another checkmate win option. Like, I wouldn't have really expected Shedinja to be on this team. Like, if you showed me those 5 Pokemon and said guess the last, I would have never guessed Shedinja. But I do think it makes a lot of sense here. Again, like I mentioned earlier, it puts on a lot of pressure and a lot of team preview pressure, which is super important. But also, it allows for Pato to play around that and give himself advantages from team preview, just knowing that they have to bring Incineroar, knowing that they have to bring certain matchup mons to beat this Pokemon. Because this Pokemon, Shedinja, is such a frustrating Pokemon to play if you don't bring the right Pokemon. And sometimes you'll bring the right Pokemon for Shedinja, but then they don't bring it, and you're dealing with a P2 Incin, and that's just a completely different take. So I feel like this team is really neat, and it's very creative, because I don't think we're seeing like any Moltres. P2 is pretty good. I think we're seeing some P2, some Shedinja. Obviously, these first 3 Pokemon are pretty boring, but the last 3 partners are pretty insane. There wouldn't be mons that I would expect going into this tournament. Pato is an incredible player, somebody who's won an internet before, top cut another. Pato is a really, really strong player in Ultra Series, and then unfortunately COVID happened. So it's really cool to see Pato win the final tournament in EU before US internets, potentially, if Pato's going to that, or Worlds. So congrats to Pato. I think the team is really cool, and again, Zacian Ogre, just so flexible. You can use it however you see fit and however you think you need to use it. And yeah, just a great performance. I think this tournament was really interesting. Like, not too much has changed meta-wise. We're still seeing Rinya. We're still seeing Zacian Ogre be as dominant as ever. But yeah, I'm really excited to see what Milwaukee and NAIC have in store for us. We'll have to watch with bated breath. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you guys have a great and amazing day, and I'll see you guys next time.